Those that were killed in the Woman Life Freedom revolutionary movement, their lives will not be in vain if we succeed in freeing our country. And I think we need to push forward and continue that good fight.
People have power. And once people see through that, the spell breaks. That's incredibly threatening to authoritarian systems.
This regime and other authoritarian regimes all are afraid of people power. They know that it only takes 3.5% of a population to rise up simultaneously for their government to be toppled.
How do you bring people together without erasing differences?
I'm curious to hear what you think are some of the blocks.
A bigger part of the problem for me feels like intentional fragmentation, keeping people divided so they never realize their collective strength.
Iranian people want a change. They don't just want reform. They want a complete toppling of this regime.
What are oppressive systems most afraid of people understanding?
Those on the left had aligned with Khomeini and had caused this revolution that has spiraled our country back into the Middle Ages.
Human rights activist, author, global speaker, and someone who has used her public platform not for comfort, but for responsibility.
When I think of Iranian people with so much brain power and education and access to resources, I can see so much potential for that country.
People feel outrage. Very few people act. What crossed that line for you? Were you staying silent? Was no longer an option?
I really believe in the Iranian people and making the right decisions. If only they're given the opportunity to turn this regime around and they are able to manage the country with a true democratic system.
Such an important distinction. Courage didn't come from confidence, it came from conviction.
Freedom for me means having the capabilities to fulfill your greatest potential as a human being, having access to what really, truly you have value in life, which is love and community and family and service and freedom of religion.
Unity without uniformity. Why do you think unity is so hard, even when the truth seems obvious?
So many women in Iran right now are going out on the street without hijab. That's because the Iranian women have been so strong and they've pushed for this. It's not because the Islamic regime has eased on these laws.
Once you see humanity pushed to that edge, you don't return to simple answers.
Listing the IRGC on the terrorist list, this is something we fought for many, many years. And just finally, recently, last year in Canada, they were listed. Now we have to push for the enforcement part of things. Australia just listed the IRGC on the terrorist list. There's still a lot of pushing in the UK, France, Germany, and the whole European Union to go ahead. They haven't, despite the fact that this is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
What disappoints you most when you look at the global response to Iran over the past 2 decades?
I learned the hard way by seeing the scars on my father's back at a young age when I had found out that he was tortured and almost executed by the regime, and that's why we fled the country.
Most dangerous part is how familiar those lies start to sound. Why do lies work so well, even when reality is visibly painful?
I feel like there's so much fragmentation that our community and our political differences are getting in the way of working together to advance our common cause. Those moments have been the most difficult. And I know the regime and their cyber army amplify a lot of this.
You mentioned Nazanin Fatehi, and I read, Amnesty International report that clearly mentions your effort saved her life.
Many governments hesitate to take hold of our hands and are still kind of clasping to the hands of the regime because they fear there is no plan afterward. They fear chaos, they fear instability, and they would rather make deals with the devil they know than the devil they don't know. But if we, as a people, were coordinated enough, smart enough to understand that we need to unite, at least transitionally. Then we have everything that it takes to get to that next stage.
Conversations like this don't give easy answers, and they're not meant to. They remind us that freedom isn't loud, it's lived.
God has played a very strong role in my life from the time I was little, and that's who I always come back to.
Welcome back. Today's conversation is a special one. My guest is someone who carries both grace and gravity, with rare honesty. She's a human rights activist, author, global speaker, and someone who has used her public platform not for comfort, but for responsibility. Nazanin Afshin Jam first entered the public eye on one of the world's biggest stages. But instead of stepping away from the world's pain, she stepped closer to it. She chose to confront injustice, to stand up for children facing execution, to speak for those who were silenced, and to keep going even when the cost was heavy. This conversation is not about perfect optimism. It's about truth, about what it means to stay human in moments of cruelty, about holding hope without denying grief, about freedom, not as a slogan, but as a daily practice that touches our health, our values, and our responsibility to one another. Nazanin, I'm truly honored to have you here. Thank you for your courage, your honesty, and your willingness to show up as you are in this moment.
Thank you, Amir. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've seen some of your past shows, and it is an honor to be on your show.
Oh, thank you for saying that. So before we begin, how are you really doing right now?
I mean, generally speaking, my family's health is well. We're all happy. I'm living in a safe country. There's no bombs flying overhead. So in my personal space, I'm well. But as I expressed to you in the past few days, it's been a very difficult time. I'm not sure if your listeners are aware, but there was a very prominent lawyer in Iran named Khosrow Ali Kurdi, who represented some of the top human rights advocates in Iran. And he died in his office under very suspicious circumstances. Of course, the regime of the Islamic Republic claimed that it was a heart attack, but us activists who have been in this field for so long know that is very unlikely given his stature and what was at stake. And most Iranians believe that there was foul play involved. So that caused a lot of sadness in our community. And to top it off, again, a few days ago, there was a funeral to celebrate his life. And again, some of the top human rights advocates were there to honor him. And they spoke up, and it resulted in them being imprisoned. So now 50 people have been arrested, and some of them, we don't know their whereabouts. We don't know their conditions. Some of them have previous health conditions and needs access to certain medications. We don't know if they are having access to that. So to be honest with you, Amir, these past few days have been very heavy on all of our hearts. And of course, it affects us physically. So not much sleep, and our hearts are elsewhere.
Thank you for answering that honestly. I really want to honor the fact that you're showing up as a human first, not as a symbol or spokesperson. Before activism, before the global stage, who were you before 2003? What mattered most to you back then?
Yes. Well, as a child growing up, I was a very upbeat, happy little girl. I was the second, that was the baby of the family. So my parents, I guess, treated me like their little princess. My sister, who's 5 years older than me, she kind of took on more of the responsibility. And she always tells me to this day, like, you had it easy. I always, she was older. So when the revolution happened, she was 6 years old when we left Iran. I was just a baby. So I don't have that fear images of the time of rushing out. Maybe internally I absorbed it, but she took on a different kind of feel. And of course, immigrated to Canada, all the hardships that new families experience when they go to a new country. She was more observant. So I guess my childhood was more an innocent upbringing. But what really mattered to me at a young age, I was always very sensitive to other people's pain. And I not only observed what people would experience, let's just say at school, if there was kids that were left out or bullied, or just family friends that would come over. I always could feel their energy. So I would absorb it in my body. I could always feel it in my stomach. And I always wanted to find a way to take away other people's pains. So there was one incident that has marked, I guess, my whole life. And that was when I was like 7 or 8 years old. With our church group, we went to the downtown east side in Vancouver. And I don't know if you know that area, but it's very downtrodden, lots of homeless people, drug addicts, and people in need. And, having grown up in West Vancouver, a very affluent neighborhood, very safe, to go physically, first of all, to that space and see a new reality, and then coming face to face with people who were in such need that they needed help to access food. It completely changed my mindset. And that's when I started asking a lot of questions to my family, like, how come there's people that don't have food, and yet where we live here, there's some people with multiple cars in their driveway. There's people with big houses. That marked my life forever. And to this day, I still ask those questions. I still don't understand the grave injustices that take place, the discrepancy between the rich and the poor. So that from that day forward, I knew I wanted to make my life serving others. I didn't know in what way, but I knew that I wanted to do something to try to at least help alleviate some of the injustices, some of human suffering. And, again, I still retain that innocence in my heart, and I was still a very happy, jovial young child. But there was this added weight always at the back of my heart that this world is not right. The world, the way it is not right. Or at least the people on this planet are not going about in the right way of living their lives.
Thank you for sharing that. It's powerful to remember that none of this began with activism. It began with a human life that hadn't been pulled into history. But being sensitive to others' feeling at those early years, speaks a lot. Take us back to 2003. On the outside, it looked like opportunity. On the inside, what was shifting?
In 2003, that's when I won the competition for Miss Canada and went on to the world competition, Miss World, and came second there. Is that the time frame you're referring to? Yeah.
Correct.
So that year, there was a lot of mixed feelings. I had won, and I felt like I wasn't just representing Canada, but because of a lot of emails coming from Iran because of my heritage, I felt like I was representing two cultures on stage. And I felt a lot of responsibility to want to make them proud, wanted to represent their voices. And in some way, it did allow me to fulfill a lot of the mission of wanting to even enter that competition in the first place. So um, before that time, I was a volunteer with the Red Cross, the International Red Cross. I would go to high schools and universities and teach on the landmine crisis, or children affected by war, the poverty disease cycle. Things that I was very interested in, because I was always interested in global issues. I had done a degree in political science and international relations at school. These were issues that touched my heart, but I was only reaching small pockets of people, and I wanted to reach more people. And my sister had said, well, why don't you enter this competition? And I did more research, and I learned that Miss World Their motto was beauty with a purpose, and their aim was to raise money for children's charities across the world. And to this date, they've raised over $1 billion for children's charities. So it was a competition that I felt my values aligned. And I said, well, why not? Let's give it a go. There's a great God above, and you never know. And so I did. And after the success there, it did give me a platform to raise awareness on some of the issues that I was concerned about. It did give me easier access to media for raising curiosity in people to know what I have to say on certain issues. So in that way, it served its purpose. And for example, when the BAM earthquake happened in Iran in 2003, believe it was in December, raised a lot of money for the victims there, and then went on to learning about my namesake Nazanin Fatehi, a young girl in Iran who was on death row, launching a campaign for her. But so it allowed that access, but at the same time, having entered a competition that is known in the world as a beauty pageant, it has its downfalls. And there was certain expectations, and I guess in the movie industry hasn't done a very good service to these competitions. They show kind of like that there's rivalry and meanness, and it's all about beauty, whereas this particular competition wasn't necessarily looking for the most beautiful woman in the world, but rather a good ambassador to their causes. They focused a lot on health, but let's just say there wasn't a competition on stage where we would walk with our bikinis and high heels on stage or anything like that. Yes, we were in our bikinis on the beach, and again, to promote health and the various causes. But just having that former title has always been attached to me, and it has been weaponized against me throughout the years, particularly in our community, the Iranian community, by the regime's cyber army. So let's just say when I'm very active online, if I ever present new ideas, that's when I see attacks coming in, and they like to draw on my former competition, the beauty pageant, and they say, well, what do you know? You're just a former beauty queen, blah, blah, blah. So it comes with good and it comes with bad, just like everything in life, I guess.
Nazanin, thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like to me that that moment wasn't just about visibility for you. It was about awareness, almost like once you saw certain truth, you couldn't unsee them. And you mentioned Nazanin Fatehi, and I read, Amnesty International report that clearly mentions your effort saved her life. And thank you for everything you've done. So
Thank
many
you.
people feel outrage. Very few people act.
Mhm.
What crossed that line for you? Were you staying silent? Uh, was no longer an option.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, just to be clear, it was a global effort. It took a whole world community to get behind Nazanin Fatehi. That's what caused her release, and the fact that she's alive today, not just alive, but she's doing very well. She's married. She has 4 children. Of course, she still lives in need, but she tells me she's happy. So that aside, what made me act? Sometimes we're so overwhelmed that it paralyzes us. We don't know how to act. But those issues that we can have an impact, or we feel like we can, then it's our obligation, it's our responsibility. If we have the means or the time or the wherewithal to help another human being, then I think we must. And I think some of the training that I got in the Red Cross actually prepared me for that moment. When I would lead these workshops, what we would say to the students was, what is the problem? So what? Why should we all care? And now what? How do we actually make a difference? And the other segment that we would teach is, if not now, then when? If not you, then who? So I internalize that. I say, well, you know, I know of this girl who's up on death row. She's innocent. I mean, when I say innocent, she did stab a man, but in self defense. But she was tried as a criminal. And it was so outrageous to me, first of all, that this teenager is facing the death penalty, despite the fact that it is against international human rights law, despite the fact that Iran has signed the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I mean, things that I didn't know at that time, but I knew viscerally, internally, that this is not right. And I wanted to see, like, is there anything I could do? So what moved me was that I also put myself in her shoes. I said, you know, if it was me in Iran and I was facing this, would anybody come to my aid? Would anybody speak out for me? And so I took that responsibility. And I think so many people around the world found it outrageous as well. They were the ones that signed the petition that eventually we had about 350,000 signatures. And it might not sound much in these days with all access to social media, but at that time, it was just the beginning of all this online activity. And so it was a real big weight for me then to approach government officials in other countries or the United Nations. But at that time, I just knew this is wrong. And if I don't speak up, who will? If not now, then when? If not you, then who? And then we amassed a lot of help from people, both in donations and just media attention and getting the word out. And not only did it save Nazanin Fatehi's life, but it raised so much awareness on the systematic discrimination of women in Iran, the fact that women are living under a gender apartheid system in Iran.
What you just mentioned sounds like silence stopped being neutral in that moment. It became a choice and not one you could live with. Uh, Nazanin, when you stepped into advocacy, did you feel prepared or did you move forward while still afraid?
Of course, still afraid, because every moment I thought, could tomorrow be the day that Nazanin Fatehi is executed? We didn't know how much time we were working with. And like, I'd never run a campaign before. Yes, I'd been involved in humanitarian pursuits, but the field of human rights was very new to me. I had to do a lot of research on international human rights law. I spoke with everybody I could to just first gain knowledge. You know, I grew up in an Iranian family. We celebrated Nowruz and all these things, but we didn't really speak very much about politics. I didn't know much about what was happening inside the country. At least, I mean, I knew that it was a very repressive regime. And I learned the hard way by seeing the scars on my father's back at a young age as well, when I had found out that he was tortured and almost executed by the regime. And that's why we fled the country. So I knew that much, but I didn't know the daily oppression of ethnic religious minorities and the severe repression on women and how, just to what extent their bodies are controlled. So it was a huge learning process, first of all. Second of all, my my Persian is not very strong. So I felt very intimidated, especially when speaking to lawyers inside Iran, trying to express myself enough to get the proper information. I was always scared, like when I do an interview, am I saying the right thing? If I say something, will it hurt her position? Will it help? So the whole time I was afraid and I was scared, like if she dies, then what? So I was scared, but always I have a lot of faith in God and his plan in things. And so that's always been a source of comfort and somewhere that I always turn to, not just for solace, but for direction. And the way the campaign was rolling out, it felt like God's hands were there, because every step of the way, when I needed just one more thing, like I was thinking like, oh, we need, I don't know, um, somebody who has knowledge in this, miraculously, like the next day I'd get an email from that kind of a person. Or when we were fundraising for her bail amount, literally we raised money and we were within few cents of the exact amount of money that we need. Like, there was just too many quote unquote coincidences that I could just brush off as coincidence. I really felt like it was guided in a way, and through a lot of prayer, reflection, and the good heart and compassion of regular people, we were able to move the campaign forward.
So when you talk about having courage of doing that and having fear at the same time, for me, that's such an important distinction. Courage didn't come from confidence, it came from conviction.
You have to be armed with enough knowledge also. That's what almost gives you that confidence to go forward. But before every interview, even before yours, Amir, every interview I do, or anytime I'm in the public sphere, I have a fear. But what you say to yourself is you have to get over this if you want to help serve more people. And you just have to turn off that part of the brain that holds you back.
I exactly understand your feeling. What is the part of this work that most people never see?
I mean, for the work that I was doing on helping children on death row, uh, I mean, they're not in the room when I'm making the calls to families, especially mothers. For some reason, that kills me. Speaking to the mothers whose children are on death row, the desperation in their voice, wanting to cling to something that will give them hope, their tears, just their like when you're on the phone with somebody or face to face. I never had a chance to meet them face to face, but on the phone, you can't deny it. Once you speaking to them and you know just how much pain they're experiencing, you can't leave them behind. And so to this day, I still hear their voices in my head, and that's what propels me to this day to do everything I can to try to help Iranians on their path to freedom and democracy. I got to a point where, yes, we do have to concentrate on individuals and helping save, the many people on death row. By the way, there's never been as much numbers of people on death row in Iran as today. Every month it's increasing. So we do have to concentrate on those victims. We do have to help refugees that have been stuck for years in Turkey trying to escape and trying to come to a safe place simultaneously while trying to bring down the regime. But I've come to a stage where I'm exhausted. I'm so tired of having to put out the little fires because I know internally that we could in one full sweep save a whole nation, 90 million people, if we're able to bring this regime down and establish a stable democratic system that's sustainable. I know it's a tall order. I believe that with enough unity and with the will of the Iranian people, and I know how courageous they are, I know it's possible. We're so at that tip to make that change that it's so difficult to know how to move forward. So I'm saying every day I receive these messages of people who are in need individually, and to try to shut off that part of my heart that says, I can't help every single one of you, but I'm going to be working on this larger project so that all of you are saved. That for me is a real struggle. And so lately I'm trying not to get as much involved with individuals because I don't know if it's that I've come into my older age or what it is, but I can't handle the one-on-ones as much because it really does affect me. And now that I have my own family and I have to take care of 3 children, let it affect me to the point where I'm, in bed, so sad and not knowing how to help all of them. So I'm not working on individual refugee cases anymore, for example, but I do still do the high level stuff. I will go to government officials here in Canada and I'll say, we need to up our numbers of Iranian refugees, or, I try to work on larger campaigns, but it's so emotionally difficult on me now that I'm trying to um, not be as specifically involved with one-on-one cases.
I'm really glad you said that. People often celebrate the strength without acknowledging the weight that comes with it. And I'd get back to your main point, so saving hundreds of thousands, if not millions, all at once. That's the key point. Nazanin, you have seen cruelty not as an idea, but as policy and punishment. How did witnessing executions, especially of minors, change how you see humanity?
Fortunately, in the line of work that I was in, we don't always save every life. In Stop Child Executions organization, I still will never forget people like Delara Darabi and other people that were executed, Akvan Muludzadeh. And those cases still haunt me because we weren't able to save them. And it actually caused many of the volunteers in our organization to fully stop because it was just too hard on them. But we can't allow the sad moments and our depression to completely stop everything, because so many more people rely on us, and their their deaths will never be in vain. Those that were killed in the Woman Life Freedom revolutionary movement, their lives will not be in vain if we succeed in freeing our country. And I think we need to push forward and continue that good fight till we are successful, so that there is accountability and justice one day. But to your question on how has it changed as I said, I've always been very sensitive to other people, but it heightens that sensitivity. It reminds me every day on the fragility of life and how we need to make use of every moment. And when I say use, I mean enjoy the moments that we are alive, that we are well, when our health is well. Like, don't take these things for granted. We have to just be mindful. So I'm constantly in a state of gratitude. I'm always praying to God and thanking him for, again, being in safety and having my health and having my family and all the good moments, because I don't take it for granted. I know life can change in an instant, and life is not always fair, and everybody experiences hardships, ups and downs, and great tragedies, but it's about knowing how to navigate them, sometimes even considering that some of the hardest moments in our life are actually there to teach us some great lessons. Sometimes in the moment we don't understand it at the time. In time it will be revealed, or maybe it won't be revealed until the afterlife. I know there is a purpose, and I am just grateful for the good moments.
I love it. What you're describing feels like a permanent shift. Once you see humanity pushed to that edge, you don't return to simple answers. Was there a moment when the weight of it all almost broke you? I bet there were many moments, but any specific moments you can mention?
There are moments that I was almost broken. I mean, let's just go back to the Nazanin Fatehi campaign. I remember she was sent to solitary confinement at some point, and normally that signifies that they're getting your execution ready. I mean, thankfully, it wasn't the case, but I remember calling Mina Ahadi, who heads the international campaign for executions, and she became a very good friend and confidant, and she was with me throughout the whole campaign. I remember breaking down to her, and she's a veteran in these cases, so she knew that, but I was new at this, and she comforted me, and she said, nothing's over till it's over. But I remember in those moments, like fearing like this could be the end, this could be the end of a life. And it was very hard. More recently, I think the times that I have felt a lot of despair and hopelessness in a way was in our own community, times when I feel like there's so much fragmentation that our community and our political differences are getting in the way of working together to advance our common cause. Those moments have been the most difficult. And I know the regime and their cyber army amplify a lot of this, and they try to cause these kinds of divisions. Mentally, I'm aware of all that. But when I'm seeing it face to face with people that I have worked with, that I love, that I know all of their hearts are pure, they all want to see a free Iran, but they have differences in ways of how they see this coming about, and then they start to fight on each other. That kills me. It does break me to the point sometimes I say maybe we're not ready. Maybe Iranian people need to first have that internal revolution inside and come to the point where they understand that it's only through acceptance, or at least not acceptance, but tolerance of other people's opinions, of other people's mindsets, because we are all chanting for democracy, and democracy doesn't just mean one opinion. Here in Canada, there's different political parties. Sometimes they're shouting each other during like there is that rivalry, but they still sit on a panel together and they have respectful conversation and they have constructive criticism and debate, but they won't try to undermine or attack physically or, so there is a learning process. But then, when I say I come to the point of breaking where I just want to give up, then something happens that regains my spirit again. And that's thinking back to all the brave Iranian people, especially the women, the youth who stood up, and the men, of course, that are so supportive, that stood up during Woman Life Freedom, that sacrificed their own lives, that were maimed, that were blinded, that, experienced the worst evil and hardships. And they are still fighting and they are still speaking out. Then it makes me shut up and, say that voice in my heart that says, keep going. If you lose hope, then, what's left? So they give me so much energy and hope in our future of our homeland country. And I know Iran is in good hands if this grassroots movement takes shape and the people are given the power. I really believe in the Iranian people and making the right decisions. If only they're given the opportunity to turn this regime around and they are able to manage the country with a true democratic system.
Nazanin, I really appreciate you sharing that. Strength doesn't mean untouched. It means surviving moments that could have ended everything. What disappoints you most when you look at the global response to Iran over the past 2 decades?
Over the past 2 decades? Well, at first, if you go way back, I think what was most disappointing was that the international community wasn't aware that the Iranian people are separate from the regime and that the Islamic Republic is not Iran. These are all two different things. And it took 20 some years to convince the international community. I mean, that's what I was trying to do for these past 20 years, is raise awareness on the human rights abuses in Iran and to say, we're separate and the Iranian people want a change. They don't just want reform. They want a complete toppling of this regime. But who convinced them was the Iranian people themselves. During Woman Life Freedom, the international community finally saw for themselves that there's just a small group of extremists that are running the show and that they are not representative of the Iranian people. So way back, what was most disappointing was just the fact that people were unaware and that the international community, world governments, continued to appease the regime officials. They would invite them, red carpet in our countries in the West. They would bow to them. They would shake their blood-soaked hands. They would continue to do economic trade. This has slowly changed. I'm not saying it's perfect. There is still levels of appeasement. We still see most of the Islamic regime's embassies open, albeit in Canada. I was proud the day that we closed off the Islamic Republic's embassy here. So it's taken time for that change of mindset, but like many Western countries now have many sanctions, Magnitsky-style sanctions on regime officials through asset freezes, travel bans, and listing the IRGC on the terrorist list. This is something we fought for many, many years, and just finally, recently, last year in Canada, they were listed. Now we have to push for the enforcement part of things. Australia just listed the IRGC on the terrorist list. There's still a lot of pushing in the UK, France, Germany, and the whole European Union to go ahead. They haven't, despite the fact that this is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. So it's a long process. Also convincing the United Nations to hold a special session on Iran. For over 15 years, I was pushing for the United Nations to give us a special session to investigate the crimes against humanity and human rights abuses that this regime has committed. And 3 years ago, when Women, Life, Freedom happened, finally they did an emergency session, and that's what the fact-finding mission on Iran, that's what was born from. And they finally, after years of investigation, found that the Islamic Republic of Iran is guilty of crimes against humanity, which is the top body for human rights. And eventually I'm hoping that this will allow for the International Criminal Court to investigate and to find them accountable and prosecute those who have committed these crimes in an international tribunal. So long process. It's taken a lot of years, but finally the world sees that separation, and hoping that once they see enough unity from our community, once our community is able to create a proper structure and roadmap and have enough funding to properly carry out this movement, then we'll start to see global leaders and the international community come on our side and finally put an end to this regime and trust that the Iranian people will create a better Iran, and not just a better Iran, but that will significantly change the region in the Middle East and better global security for the entire world.
Thank you for talking about it. And Nazanin, I'd like to know on the flip side, what gives you real hope right now, not performative hope?
It's what gives me hope are the youth in Iran. I think back to always them, and I've seen their courage and their bravery and, access to internet. I mean, sometimes it can be a curse. I've seen the bad sides of it, but won't get into that. There is a flip side, is that Iranian people know the way they could be living. They know the potential that Iran could be at this stage. It could be a global leader in so many different areas. It has so much natural resources and know-how. There's so much brain power in that country that we should be one of the leading countries in the world. So I think they give me hope because they know what their potential is, and they want this regime gone. They want a free, democratic, secular country with the rule of law, and they want a constitution based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These are all the proper elements that you need for a thriving country, a liberalized country, to reach its full potential. When I see some of these videos by the young inside Iran, and I hear their brave spirit, and I see civil rights leaders like Tumaj Salehi and others, and in their songs, the kind of messaging that they put out, then it gives me a lot of hope on where we can be directed.
It's striking how hope for you still comes from people, not institutions. What?
Definitely. It's always people. For me, it's always about people. As much bad and evil that I've seen more goodness and people's hearts. And that's where I get the most inspiration. But that said, institutions are very important. Like, we have to build proper institutions to carry things forward, and really working in our civil movements, our grassroots institutions, as I said, our judicial system, and making sure that we have the rule of law and a proper democratic system with a government that has clear separations between legislative and executive. All these there has to be checks and balance. So of course, institutions are important, but it's the people that will create the proper institutions. So
Absolutely. So I'm curious to know what hurts more, the cruelty itself or the indifference around it?
that's a very good question. I think both. Well, cruelty, to this day, I don't understand how a person or a whole people can create so much pain, whether we're talking about the Holocaust or other genocides, where it doesn't just take one mad person. It really is a community, um, stigmatizes and dehumanizes a whole people to the point where they can literally not just kill others, but make them suffer, like torture them to the point where they are actually almost enjoying seeing the other suffering. That I'll never understand. I mean, you can study it and justify, but no, I can't understand that part. Maybe, you know what, Amir? I think it's the indifference that's more painful. Even our own community, there's so many people that have the means to help, and they choose not to, even though they are the ones that have escaped a country that they've seen their people, suffer so much, that they've had to leave that land to make a new life for themselves, and they almost choose to blindly forget about it and to live a quote unquote normal life. And I mean, blame some of them. Some of them, it's just too hurtful. They can't go there. But if you're not willing to, if you're not, you don't have the time to enter the fight, so to speak, by volunteering your time to get involved, at the very least, they could be offering their resources, their funds to help with the movement. And there are, as you know, Amir, our community, the Iranian Canadian, Iranian American, Iranian European communities are so successful and affluent and are at the top of their universities and in their workplaces. They've really built some of the biggest businesses that we're seeing. And, some of them are very generous. I see them donating to the Philharmonic music, the arts, this. And yet it surprises me, those that have been asked if they would help with this cause will say, we don't get involved in politics. Or some of them even have some relations with the regime. And that's so hurtful. That's almost worse. Some of the people, part of the regime, they've been so brainwashed into a certain ideology, and they're kind of almost lost causes. But those who are aware and still choose to like blindly close off their values for profit, or not willing to remember their past and where they came from, it's very hurtful and upsetting.
Absolutely. So for me, indifference often hurts more than opposition because it feels like abandonment.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're aware of something and you choose to turn, I mean, like, but, I don't know if it's because of this globalized world where families are so, separate, and it's not that sense of community that we once had. But, like, if it was right at your feet, there's nothing you could do. Like, for example, if there's, like, a drowning child next to you, I would hope, I would expect that, like, 99.9% of people would reach out their hand and try to save that child from drowning if they could. But, like, out of sight, out of mind. A lot of people, like, if it's so far away. Oh, that far off country, like, I don't have access. But I think if they were the ones speaking to those people suffering directly, like the ones that I do, they couldn't they couldn't close their eyes. They couldn't close their ears. There's just no way, I don't think. Maybe we just have to bring it closer to home, but I don't know, how do we do that?
That's a very good question. So we haven't been successful so far. You're right. This indifference hurts really badly. Nazanin, oppressive systems survive on distortion. What are the most dangerous lies totalitarian regimes sell to their people?
I mean, it's a bunch of lies. It touches on disinformation, on the narratives that they push out, having control over media. They're able to enter people's television sets in their homes and spew out their particular narrative. And if others don't have access to satellite or other means, that's the news and information that they're getting. So let's just say in Iran, they will continue to spew lies about Israel and the fact that Jews are the enemy and that they should be killed, and that the West is evil and they're trying to corrupt a whole people. And then through their mosques, they again sell a certain ideology. And I have no problem with religion at all. Religion could be very enhancing in people's lives, but it's the politicization and the combination of politics and the state that corrupts. Iran is a theocratic system, as you know, and there is no separation between religion and the state. And so through their mosques, through media, and through disinformation on social media, they're able to propagate certain lies and, again, not just dehumanize, but making it out that others are the ones that are corrupting and that the West is evil. I mean, that's in the case of Iran, but of course, Russia, China, Venezuela, and all these other authoritarian autocratic regimes, they all use the same playbook in pushing their narrative and trying to control the mindset of a whole population and vilifying the.
And the most dangerous part is how familiar those lies start to sound. Why do lies work so well, even when reality is visibly painful?
Hmm. It's the repetition. And, this regime has access to so much money that they have the control of the loudspeakers. They're able to put on these big conferences at the Doha Forum. Guess who was represented on stage?
Hmm.
Zarif and people like Trita Parsi, who was the head of NIAC, who's a well-known, mouthpiece for the Islamic regime. They are the ones that are represented on stage rather than true Iranian, suffering people who want freedom and democracy. Or, previously at the World Economic Forum or the Munich Security Forum, at these other huge international forums, it was traditionally regime officials who would come and they would outright lie or be on these NBC programs or CNN and blatantly saying, no, we don't have executions of minors, or no, women can do what they want. We're not enforcing hijab. And like, are you kidding me? Like, we have proof. And even Western media have been lied to again, and they're they're repeating the lies of the regime by showing that so many women in Iran right now are going out on the street without hijab. It's true that if you go to Tehran, you're starting to see that. But that's because the Iranian women have been so strong and they've pushed for this. It's not because the Islamic regime has eased on these laws. And in fact, they're continuing to up there and saying there's going to be more restrictions, more fines. Businesses are going to shut down if you don't wear the hijab. They're doubling down on that. But then the Western media is picking up like the regime is easing, and see, they're becoming more Western. It's no. But the regime is so clever, and they know their game all too well on how to try to spin things.
How can people learn to tell the difference between what is promised and what is actually delivered?
Yeah. I mean, Iranian people inside Iran have become so sophisticated. They mostly see through these lies. And they know when the regime is hiding something or spinning something, but sometimes they don't. I mean, right now, one of the women that was arrested at Khosrow Ali Kurdi's funeral was Nobel Peace Laureate Narges Mohammadi. And she gained a lot of prominence on the world stage. And so she became a direct threat to the regime. And the regime has put in a lot of resources to try to defame her. And online, you will repeatedly see people saying that she is actually a stooge of the regime, or she's a reformist and she'll always remain a reformist. She doesn't want a full regime change. Whereas publicly, she's talked about a change of regime. Yes, at some point she was a reformist. Perhaps her husband still talks about more reformist, but she has never done that. But the regime is so good at trying to create that narrative that a lot of people have bought into it, even on the outside of Iran. They're repeating some of these lies. And because she could be potentially a political rival against certain other potential rival leaders in a new Iran, they have repeated it too. So it's unfortunate that disinformation is rampant and it's bought. And Amir, I would love to hear from you if you have any ideas on how do we break.
Always, it's been for me, education. Just constantly learning, constantly educating yourself, constantly being sensitive to your environment, what's going on. It takes me to previous question, indifference hurts more than anything else.
Mhm.
So that being said, what responsibility do everyday people like me, not like you as an activist, not experts, what responsibilities do we have to educate ourselves?
I think just being aware, reading news sources, multiple news sources. Don't just get locked down on one source of media, because as much as we think that media is unbiased, or that, journalists are doing their due diligence, I have learned sometimes the hard way, having been married to a former member of parliament of over 18 years, that the media is not always truthful. Sometimes it's sensational. And so it's incumbent on us to do our due diligence and to try to do our own research. As I said, have access to different kinds of media, making up our own opinions, speaking directly with people. This is also very important. You know, I have access to certain activists inside Iran, and I've always tried to do this because I'm not part of any political group or organization when it comes to Iranian matters, factions. I work with people from right to left of the political spectrum. I've I've done campaigns with monarchists, with people from the Workers' Communist Party, and everybody in between, because I don't ask them even what is your politics. I just want to make sure that these projects get done and that we advance. And so for me, it doesn't make sense to even ask. And eventually, in a free Iran, when we get to the stage of the ballot box, there will be plenty of time for debate and going through all that. But at this stage, it makes no sense. And I try to get my news from different sources and go inside the country. And when I say go inside, not physically, but speak to people inside the country and ask them about their opinions. What is the word on the street? What are people saying about different issues? And I know that the regular person doesn't have time to necessarily do all that, but at the very least, they can, speak to their families back home or just access different news sources.
Thank you for that. Nazanin, it is unbelievable. I have seen quite a number of people that they're doing certain things, they're promoting certain actions, and they're following certain behaviors without even knowing why.
Yeah.
That's the simple question I always, when we talk to friends and to people. So okay, always ask why. Do not take things for granted. So just why you are doing this.
Mm-hmm.
If you can answer to that why, many of our problems will be solved. And what you mentioned reframes awareness as responsibility, not opinion.
Yeah.
I love that.
I
So
agree with you. I think sometimes we get caught up in fervor. If we're around people who are chanting certain things, some people just automatically will start to do it without questioning, wait, do I believe in this? Why am I doing this? It's kind of like the analogy of like the trees that are around you in a forest, rather than like looking from a bird's eye view up top and say, what are my values? Does this align with what I believe in? And so we have to be very careful of that, not getting caught up in things without really questioning our own beliefs and values and seeing the bigger picture. So saying like, if I start to condemn this person, is that really going to help our common cause of changing the regime, or is it hinder it? Every time we say something in our social media posts or out loud, we have to ask ourselves within, like, is this helping or hurting the overall movement? I think we
that
have to just reframe, recheck inside our own hearts every once in a while.
that's gold. As we talked about, we are more divided than ever. How do you bring people together without erasing differences? This is a key
You know,
question, I believe.
differences exist. Even in our Western liberal democracies, they exist and they should be encouraged because that's what makes human beings so interesting and that we thrive, because it's almost like competition to get to the right solution for a whole nation or what have you. So you don't want to erase division, but you want respect of opinion, and you want to encourage freedom of expression. These are all universal values of human rights. So I think the best way of going forward is understanding each other. I think our community, the Iranian community, has a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. For example, in 1979, when the revolution happened, that so many people were upset that let's just say that those on the left had aligned with Khomeini and had caused this revolution that has spiraled our country back into the Middle Ages. Naturally, there's that pain and that anger from a certain group of people, my mother included. My mother's father was a general in the Shah's army, grew up in a very like monarchist type family, and she she always talked about stories of Zaman Shah, the time of the Shah. Like everything was so good, and there was parties, and people were happy, and she lived her whole life with that nostalgia of that time frame. But you can't get stuck in something. So there was that pain for her. But then now a lot of people on the left, or those marginalized groups that were from ethnic or religious minorities that were persecuted throughout, they have a lot of pain and stories and trauma. And I think if we're able to get these different groupings of people together to share their stories and to really come to points of agreement and points of commonality. What do they share in common? Oh, they share the same commonality of wanting to see a free, prosperous Iran. Okay, great. That's one point in common. They want to see a proper judicial system with the rule of law. Okay, great. That's one common system. There's going to be differences in the way we get there, or our politics, or who is going to be the next leader of Iran. But we first have to get to that one stage of establishing a system where we can get, to the next down the line. But I think as kind of our thread throughout this talk, Amir, is the commonality of our humanity, the fact that we are all human, the fact that, mothers all want to see their children have food on their table and grow and have access to education. These are all common things that ground us as humans. And I think the more dialogue we have in a very safe environment, then it'll allow that to grow. And also having access to proper moderators with almost like psychological backgrounds. I've seen in our movement how important our psychotherapists, our psychologists have been in mitigating some of the differences. And I've seen in those circumstances where we've had conferences or retreats, if we do have access to those proper moderators with the proper skills, then there is chance to move forward. And I think that was one of our mistakes at the time when the quote unquote Georgetown leaders came together, Reza Pahlavi and Hamed Ismailion, Masi Ali Najad, Shirin Ebadi, and the others. I think it was very rushed. I don't think they had enough one-on-one, face-to-face time together. They were all rushed and doing their own travels. And I mean, not to say that they weren't doing good work. They were all on different media shows and stuff. But if we're going to go up against a regime with access to so much power and money, then on the flip side, there needs to be enough opportunity for people of different political ideologies to have one-on-one time, be almost living in a space for several months on end and hashing out things daily. Like it's not a joke, it's not a side thing. This is a revolution. Like if you want to fight a revolution, you got to become a revolutionary, and that means fully committing yourself. So I think
Right.
that was one of the things that was missing, is just more access, and again sharing that shared humanity among.
That feels realistic. Unity without uniformity. Why do you think unity is so hard, even when the truth seems obvious?
Wow, that's a big question. Yes, I mean, to any rational, sane person on the
Hmm.
outside, you would think, of
That's the
course,
caveat.
like to get this change of regime, let's just say, there needs to be everybody that has a stake in this, or anybody who's against the regime, even if, the enemy of your enemy is your friend, like that kind of mindset, getting everybody pooled together for their common cause. On paper, truth does seem obvious, doesn't it, Amir Jan? Definitely, we have a problem of unity when it comes to politics, but not when it comes to shared projects. And I say this from experience because, again, in over 20 years of doing this and having worked with people from all factions, when we have worked on projects together, it works out great. And since Women Life Freedom, I was able to assemble a network of Iranian diaspora groups. So we have now on paper 100 Iranian diaspora groups and over 100 high-profile advocates. And whereas monthly we don't meet, and not everybody can show up, but a good representation of these groups come together. And we've proven that we can work on joint projects, and we've been successful, and certain synergies have grown. And I mean, that has been my best asset. I guess what I can contribute best since Women Life Freedom is just making those connections, getting the right people together to move forward on different campaigns. And it's been through that time that a lot of people have met and built relations of trust. And these are all ingredients that are needed eventually to hopefully bring this regime down. But where I've seen troubles is always when political factions and quote unquote political leaders get together. And naturally, in politics, we all have different opinions on how to solve bigger issues. But in our community, I think one of our downfalls has been the problem of ego around certain individuals and way of moving forward. So they're not willing necessarily to listen. They want to speak before they listen to others. And even if they're going to listen, they already have such a preset answer in their head for whatever the problem is that there's no give and take. We don't have as much practice in reaching compromise and consensus. This is kind of what I've observed. And that's why I thought, if we're able to get a group of technocratic experts involved, void of the political, at least in a transitional period,
Right.
we would be able to get to that next phase. My colleague during Stop Child Executions organization, my co-founder, David Hetibari, actually wrote a book recently called Beyond Ideology and addresses some of this and the fact and the emphasis on a technocratic team that isn't bound by any ideology per se. I think if we're able to construct a pluralistic democratic alternative without, let's just say, one specific leader or ideology, then maybe we can get over that hump. And then in a free Iran, then it's everybody's bet. Everybody can then be involved in the democratic process and have their political parties involved. But I'm curious to hear what you think are some of the blocks.
I really love that. I cannot deny the role of individuals, that they can play their role in a better way. But a bigger part of problem for me feels like intentional fragmentation, keeping people divided so they never realize their collective strength. And you mentioned in part of your conversation that they're doing that intentionally. And people awareness, when it rises, they understand how powerful they can become collectively.
Yes, you hit the nail on the button. And, Amir, if you look at my social media, my X page, where I write certain pieces, there might be a few comments underneath. There might be 30, 40, 50 likes. But anytime I stress on unity, you won't believe the number of commentary in the negative. And when I click on those individual people who are condemning unity, I see so many of those accounts were created in the Woman Life Freedom time set. If you look at the country that they're coming from, often it shows Iran or web or some obscure thing. It gives me the indication that a lot of those profiles are fake or they're cyber army, and they're meant to create chaos and suspicion and defamation and spreading lies. And so the algorithms don't work. Like, it's not the regular algorithm. And I know that it's being amplified. And also, I know that certain people are promoting one particular leader over another. And so they emphasize that person. But I think there's some strange things going behind the scene it just doesn't make sense for the overall to move forward, we absolutely need unity, or we're not going to get to our destination.
What you just mentioned, is a natural transition to my next question. What are oppressive systems most afraid of people understanding?
Definitely people power.
I love that.
I think this regime, and other regimes, other authoritarian regimes, all are afraid of people power. They know that it only takes 3.5% of a population to rise up simultaneously for their government to be toppled. Erica Chenoweth did a very in-depth study on this, and that's the magic number she allocates. I mean, give or take 1, 2%, either way. But a dictatorship in history, has never been able to keep power, and that has been through people power and nonviolent civil movements that have toppled different regimes and have been the most sustainable. Yes, there are certain regimes that have been toppled through violence and military coups, but again, Erica Chenoweth pinpoints that if you want it to be successful over a long term, it has to be a nonviolent movement. And so regimes are not stupid. They've seen different velvet revolutions happen, the Orange Revolution, the Velvet Revolution, the Rose Revolution. And so there is past precedents and examples of how people have taken over their countries. Now, Iran is a little bit different in that, Iranians live under a police state, and it's very militarized and it's very brutal. So it's a lot harder than some of the, Eastern European countries that we've seen fall, but it's the same principles. And I know if we have a sustained movement, we can get to our destination, because we've seen the women and the youth rise up at certain times. We've seen now, with the economic hardship in Iran, the different truckers that have protested. We've seen the petrochemical areas rise up, but at different times. Can you imagine if we had a coordinated body that could coordinate all of these different things at the same time? And now, with the water shortages, electricity shortages, we're approaching day zero, where people in Tehran will have no water at their disposal, where the president is saying that they might have to change the capital of the country. I mean, we have all the elements of desperation, like of people suffering and hitting rock bottom, that we're really at that time where we could see this regime gone any minute, but it has to be coordinated, and we need to have that type of coordination body at the ready to take over. And I think that's what so many governments hesitate to take hold of our hands and are still kind of clasping to the hands of the regime, because they fear there is no plan afterward. They fear chaos, they fear instability, and they would rather make deals with the devil they know than the devil they don't know. But if we, as a people, were coordinated enough, smart enough to understand that we need to unite, at least transitionally, then we have everything that it takes to get to that next stage.
It's beautifully said. I want to put more emphasis on what you said. People have power. And once people see through that, the spell breaks. That's incredibly threatening to authoritarian systems.
Yes, yes. I think I used to do speeches in different universities and high schools and just different groups, where I would emphasize the power of the individual and how each and every one of us has the power to make incredible change in this world. We can, save a human life, or in the bigger scope of things, in our context, we can change an entire nation. We have that power, and it does come from individual. It's not the person next door. There's been studies that there's been rape that has happened in New York City, and people have been watching from their buildings, like hundreds of people watching the same scene, but nobody took action to pick up a phone to call the police because they think somebody else is going to do it. No, nobody's going to do it. You need to do it. Like each and every one of us needs to do our part, and that cumulative effect will shake the world, cause earthquakes, and allow for great change. But people have to understand their personal responsibility in making that change.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You mentioned the work that you're doing, which is adorable, impacted your mental and emotional health on different part of this journey. How do you protect your inner world from digital noise, and how you keep your emotional mental health intact?
It's difficult, Amir. It is difficult, but what has always centered me is my faith. And God has played a very strong role in my life from the time I was little. And that's who I always come back to. I pray a lot. I center myself. I don't call it meditation per se, but I guess when you're in that state, it is a sort of a meditative state where I connect directly with God. I speak to Him. Um, I feel His love, His presence. When I have troubles, I turn to Him, and sometimes the problems are very overwhelming, and I can always rely on Him. At certain parts of my life, of course, faith wanes and goes up and down. During the times I've had my children, a lot of my focus was on them, and I didn't have as much time to go to church or read scripture. But now that they're older, my faith is stronger more than ever. That has helped me enormously. And especially in the last 3 months, I have felt really overwhelmed with the problems that are happening inside Iran. I've felt a lot of the weight of this fragmentation that we've been talking about. And in that moment, God really helped me. I turned to Him and He said to me, "Be still and know that I am God." And that's a passage in the Bible that has repeatedly come up to me in the past few months. He has told me, "Put your burdens at my feet and I will take on um take on these burdens." He said, "Be still and know that I am working on this." Like, so I automatically, the weight lifted off my shoulders. Of course, I always feel somewhat responsible for what is taking place and the problems that come to my attention, but at least it didn't come to the point where I felt paralyzed. Like, just knowing that He's able to take on a lot of those problems allowed me to breathe again. And I believe in Him, and I feel like He's working on some major things. I think we're going to feel some things, some changes happening in the new year in Iran. Uh, he's told me to not worry.
I
We'll
love
see.
it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that with us. Nazanin, on this show, we talk about freedom as something built on foundations. How do you define freedom today?
Freedom. That's my favorite thing in the whole world. I think that's the most important thing in the whole world. More than food, more than shelter. It's what makes people live. It's what we strive for. I mean, I think about birds in cages, and they might have a safe place and they might have food, access to food, but they're not able to do what they're born to do, which is to fly, to be free, and to experience their own life, and to have the opportunity to live out their own life, not under the control of something else or some other being. So freedom for me, like what that looks like, it means having the capabilities to fulfill your greatest potential as a human being, being able to have access to things that you long for. And I don't mean material possessions. I mean having access to what really, truly you have value in life, which is love and community and family and service and freedom of religion, being able to practice your religion without being persecuted per se. In Iran, people don't have that luxury. Baha'is are, censored. They're not able to get access to higher education. Their graves are desecrated. Even Christians are arrested all the time, or ethnic minorities are persecuted. So that means being able to speak in your mother tongue, wear your beautiful traditional outfits without fearing that people are going to come and break it up or deny your basic rights. Freedom for a woman means being able to wear what you want, not being forced to wear a head covering, not being told what to do, having bodily autonomy, making your own choices, having your dreams realized. If you want to become president of the nation or a judge, you have that right, and not have a government tell you that you're not allowed.
Right.
It means being a lawyer and defending your client and not fearing that you're going to be the next one in jail because of just speaking out. These are all examples of what I see freedom looking like for Iran. Being free from fear and fear from want.
Your definition feels earned. Has that definition changed since your early activism years?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would want to go back in time and ask myself that question. It's hard to know. I mean, definitely I've
Right.
evolved as a person from the time I was little to now. I think every year of our life we grow in wisdom and we experience more, we see more, and so I'm sure it has changed. I just don't know how it has. What
Yeah,
did I
certainly
think
there has
freedom
been
was then?
an evolution, and I can clearly see that.
Mm.
How do you think about wealth, or let's say financial independence, not as excess, but as a stability and choice?
Hmm. Again, like when I'm referring everything to Iran, because that's in my purview and my everyday life. I mean, when I think of the Iranian people with so much brain power and education and access to resources, I can see so much potential for that country and for individual people because I've seen how successful they are on the outside. We have the examples. And so it pains me that Iranian people have to work 2, 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I had one individual contact me not long ago, and he's a single father. He has 2 children. One of them has epilepsy. One of them has other needs. He's homeless. They don't have enough food in their fridge. They don't have access to this epilepsy medication that he needs. And this is just one example, but you can multiply that so many times. So when I said freedom of fear and freedom from want of just having basic dignity and access to basic needs, a country that could, but a regime that has been so corrupt and has mismanaged the country to the point where people are starving and below the poverty levels, um, and giving away Iranian people's money to terrorist factions rather than feeding their own and providing security and comfort to their own people. This is a travesty. It's, it's a complete denial of human rights and dignity. My relationship with money is very interesting. I think money is a tool, so it's a neutral thing. It can provide for our needs, and not just our basic needs, but it can pay for trips so that you can enjoy and have experiences. But I think generally speaking, our world has become too focused on wealth, on money, on materials, on possessions. I think we've forgotten as a people what are the values that truly matter in life. And as I go back way to the start of our our conversation, I think there's just too much discrepancy between the rich and the poor. Why should anybody even be a billionaire on this planet? It just doesn't make sense when there's people that have absolutely nothing and are even here in my own hometown. I live in a small town with about 5,000 people, and many of the children at the school have to go through the lunch program where they're given a hot meal or a meal because their families can't afford it. This is in Canada. So I think we need to go back to basics, back to an age of innocence where we really try to minimize and become more detached on materials and all attachments, really. Uh, that's a focus as human beings. I think we need to start to go back within and see what we really need, shed what we don't, and having more simplistic lifestyles. And that's something I'm striving for. This new year, I'm putting a lot of emphasis on this and trying to teach my children to rid themselves of as much attachments as they can.
A lot to contemplate. Thank you so much for sharing.
That's going to be for another conversation.
Nazanin, if you could speak to yourself 20 years ago, is there anything you would do differently, not strategically, but emotionally?
20 years ago, let's see, I would have been 26 years old. I would probably tell myself not to care as much about what others think or perceive. I've come to a point in my life that I know myself very well, and I love myself because I know my own heart. I've tried to live a life that I've given myself to service, and I've tried to share my love and light with others. I've tried to be a follower of Christ and everything that he um, stands for. But I think at some stage in my life, in my earlier years, I would get very hurt by other people's perception. If they didn't know me, they had preconceived ideas about the kind of person I am. And so it bothered me when people didn't know the true me. But I think in time, you have to just say, I can only control the things that I can control, and I don't have control over things I don't. So just trying to clear the mind. And if you are comfortable and happy in your own mind and heart, then that's enough. And, my family, my friends, and those that I associate with know the true Nazanin. And if those that don't take the time to even ask questions or get to know me, then I have no control, and I shouldn't let that bother me. And in the end of the day, I'm a child of God, and God loves me too.
So I believe that's such a generous answer to yourself.
It's taken a lot of time, Amir, to get to that.
Of course. Nazanin, when everything feels heavy, what keeps you moving forward?
I think exercise is helping more. Again, when I'm full on in my activism mode, I become very imbalanced. I get very obsessed on the campaigns or projects that I'm doing in relation to helping other people that I often forget myself. I neglect other parts of my life. And I think it goes against my principles of wanting to keep a balance of mind, body, and spirit. And so the mind is fully active, all the time active, but the body is neglected with, oh, we can always exercise tomorrow, and the tomorrow never comes. And then the spirit, again, I neglected for a long time, you know, reading scripture and being very connected to God because of just daily circumstance. But I think we can't neglect those parts. And in fact, we can go so much further and we accomplish so much more when all of those that triangle is aligned and balanced. So I just try to remind myself, and, when I can, go out for a walk, take the dogs for a walk, strength training with weights or what have you that automatically makes you feel good. It just puts your physique and mind in the right alignment and ready to serve. And and spirit always just being grateful, being mindful, almost anticipating what other people need in advance. Peruse and see, if somebody's not feeling good or downtrodden, and saying, well, what could I do to pick them up? Or just like, I think always, if we're in a helping others but also not neglecting our own needs, then we can be the best version of ourselves.
Beautiful. If someone watching or listening feels powerless, what's one small but meaningful action they can take today?
I think just giving a compliment to somebody. If you give a compliment to somebody, they'll smile, and you'll automatically feel like, wait, my actions have actually caused something. That's just like a very small example, but it's an example that reflects on a larger scale. Yeah.
I
Like,
love that.
I don't always have cash on me, but I have these little coins that have some like written on them. I wrote hope or love or faith or resilience or whatever, and I always have them in my purse or my pocket. And if I pass by somebody that's homeless or somebody that looks like they're not doing so good, you just give that. And I think that gives them a little
I
a
l-
little pick me up, that they know that they're not forgotten, that there's something that's looking out for them, or that they just feel a little bit of, just little acts of kindness can go a long way.
so the act of generosity is not always for others, it's first for yourself, in my opinion.
It's for both. Like, you both benefit. That person benefits, and your heart grows 1 millimeter each time.
Right. And where do you put the role of gratitude?
It's so important. Being grateful, mindful, centers you. It just places you in a good state of mind,
Absolutely.
and it prevents, spiraling, because this world is sometimes so hard, and there's so much bad sometimes, and all you're bombarded with news of the terrible things going on in the world, and so many wars happening. And if you're grateful, you go into a state, and it kind of keeps a little bit of a bubble that allows you just to even continue, just to, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Is there anything you rarely talk about or you wanted to talk about for a long time? If there is, this is the time.
My gosh, what an invitation. I haven't thought about it in advance, like, I mean, you're acting like a quasi therapist right now for me, just face to face. I can tell you what I've been doing in the past few couple of weeks. I've started to watch Marie Kondo's shows, and she talks about um, you know things that spark joy in your heart. So you're supposed to, like, empty out your whole closet and see which things spark joy, which things don't, and keep the things that do and don't. And the reason I started watching this is because I want to get rid of all my worldly possessions. If I could, I would literally get rid of everything in this house and just have the minimum. Of course, my children are not at that stage. They want their toys, or I wouldn't push that upon them, and I want them to have a very comfortable setting where they feel welcome, and but I'm at the stage of my life where I want the most minimal. I want to have a couple of pairs of clothes that I can, wash and rewash, and have no possessions all around. I want it to keep very clean, clear, and I think that will clear my mind as well. And I can use, if, for example, if I sell those possessions, then I can use that towards a freedom fund for Iran or for other humanitarian pursuits, or I could just give it away, whichever. I have to pray on that and see which is the way I'm supposed to go. But I don't know if you know that song by, I think her name is Camila Cabello, or maybe I'm not saying it right, but she says, the world can change its heart. You're beautiful. So the world, like, I feel like we've come to a point in this world that we have too many possessions. And again, as I said to you earlier, attachments. And I sometimes wonder, well, if I got rid of everything, if I was to have to do a meeting with an official, or if I had to go to the UN, or if I had to go to a whatever, then would it be disrespectful if I'm wearing a very simple, linen outfit? Or would the world have to change its heart?
Right.
This I'm going to have to reflect more, because I don't want to be disrespectful to certain institutions or traditions. But at the same time, I think we all have to kind of come back to a more simplistic lifestyle and be more willing to give. And so if this is just the beginning of a journey, and it can inspire other people, especially our young, I think girls and boys nowadays are very influenced by social media. They're bombarded with imagery of quote unquote brand names and things that they have to quote unquote be cool or accepted. And I think there's a lot of pressure on image. And so if I can do one little act and speak about it and talk about how we don't need these things to be fulfilled or to have any kind of meaning, then I'm willing to. I've never been married to things. It's so I'm wondering. These are just thoughts that I'm having, and I'm not able to express it very well right now, Amir, because I haven't thought about it clear enough. But I know it's a move and direction I want to go, and I'm just wondering, how do I take that next step?
I truly appreciate that sharing it with us. Nazanin, thank you for showing up as you are, not as a symbol, not as a headline, but as a human being who has carried grief, responsibility, and hope at the same time. Conversations like this don't give easy answers, and they're not meant to. They remind us that freedom isn't loud, it's lived, it's protected, and sometimes it's simply choosing not to turn away. I'm deeply grateful for your honesty, your courage, your willingness to stay human in a world that often rewards indifference.
And I appreciate it, Amir John. Thank you for allowing the space and having access to your viewers. And I hope one person in this interview gets something from this, and stay blessed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Until next time, climb your own summit.